Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. I'm coming to you from a very special place to me, Dallas, Texas, a place where I lived from age 23 to 31. And so far, this has been a sensational trip. 9 colleges down, 3 to go. And as great as it is, it's starting to feel a little bit like it's time to get back home. You know, Karis and Anitra have been visiting relatives for 3.5 weeks. They both left before I left. They were in Canada for a few weeks, Detroit for a little less than a week, Tennessee for a little less than a week, and they just got home. So I am kind of itching to get back, but I'm also itching to do a really deep dive and share with you what I've learned from these many visits. I spent the last 2 days in Fort Worth visiting Texas Christian University, better known as TCU. One thing I'm excited to announce to you is that Heath Einstein, the VP of Enrollment at TCU, and one of the most respected and insightful admissions leaders, has committed to coming on our podcast every 6 months. So I'll be interviewing Heath in June. Now, you probably won't hear that till August, but I'll do the interview in June on the topic of what you need to know about recommendations, rec letters. Now, 3 years ago, when I asked Susan, Julia, and Vince to be co-hosts on Your College Bound Kid, because we were going from a podcast every Thursday to one every Thursday and Monday, I asked them partly because I really like them. I asked them partly because I really respect them. I asked them partly because I felt we would work well together and we'd have good chemistry on the air. But I also intentionally asked them because they had done admissions and college counseling. And to use admissions parlance, they'd been on both sides of the desk. And it's my experience that when counselors have been on both sides of the desk, they have the most comprehensive perspective on college admissions. While Heath Einstein has been on both sides of the desk multiple times, multiple different schools, different states, in all kinds of different roles in the admission office, as well as multiple stints as a school-based college counselor. He's an outstanding teacher. I'm excited for you to hear his wisdom twice a year. When I say twice a year, that means at least 6 weeks and maybe 8 weeks, because I typically do a 60 to 75-minute recording, and then we chunk it out into 20-minute doses over 3 to 4 episodes. Now, yesterday was an emotionally moving day for me. Our son Elijah was buried at Westland Cemetery in Dallas on March 5th, 1995. And I'd never been back there since the funeral. So I had real mixed feelings about going back because I just wasn't sure how emotional I was going to be. But after spending time at the gravesite, I left inspired. There's a verse in the Bible that says, "What is your life but a vapor?" Literally like a puff of condensation that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. And I was just reminded about the brevity of life, the need to make every moment count. And, I was thinking back, like I was a broke college student back in 1995. How did I pay for this funeral? And I was on the phone with Anitra because, I won't get into it, but it took us forever to find the plot of land where the tombstone was. And she had all the papers in the file. And then she reminded me it was her boss, Bruce Miller, that paid for the whole funeral. And, philanthropy has always inspired me. So I left inspired, but I also left feeling like spending time by the tombstone was just a sacred place I need to come back to and visit at least once every 5 years. If you're new to Your College Bound Kid, our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We do it by providing 2.5 to 3 hours every week of commercial-free content, with a shorter episode on Mondays, unless I get carried away and can't stop being a chatterbox, and a longer one on Thursdays. Now, on Mondays, I share my thoughts about something in the world of college admissions that I think will be of interest to you. This Wednesday is my last day of visiting colleges on this trip, and I will have visited 45 colleges since September 9th. And I was just reflecting on all these visits, and there's all the thoughts that were like percolating in my mind. I honestly do not believe that I would have visited 45 colleges in September if we did not have this podcast. Just knowing that so many of you are listening, looking for tips, looking for guidance to help your student just ignites a passion in me. Now, I still would have visited a bunch. I probably would have visited like 30 just to improve my skills as a counselor and my knowledge and my ability to help families that I'm working with, but I wouldn't have visited 45. And, this podcast thing is weird. I could be in an elevator with 99% of our listeners, just the two of us, and I wouldn't know who you are. But I feel this strange parasocial connection with all of you, especially those who never miss an episode. That's why I refer to you as our listening family, and I say that with genuineness, and I say that with affection. So as I was reflecting on how I can add some value in these Monday sessions, I decided I'm going to do a series based on my observations from these 45 visits since September. No, I'm not referring to college spotlights here. We're going to be doing a lot of that. We're going to have the rest of our team share visits they've done in the last few years, plus ones I've done, and get them up on our website by June 1st and let you pick the colleges you want us to do deep dives on. I'm talking about something very different in this series. I'm talking about just observations that I'm making either from the visits themselves or conversations I have with leaders. And that's going to start today. I'm going to talk today about reasons why the acceptance rate at a college, the one that they share, is often not very accurate. It often makes the college look a lot more selective than they actually are. And after this, you'll hear the final part of Lisa's excellent interview with Jenny Winthrop and Rebecca Anderson, the two authors of the best-selling book, The Disengaged Teen. Okay, let's dive in with my conversation about why acceptance rates often make a college look a lot more selective than they actually are. And I wanted to do this because in the past, I've said things like, if you look at a school's acceptance rate, sure, sometimes it's a little manipulated, but for the most part, it's pretty good. And you look at their test scores, and you can get a pretty good sense of how selective a college is. There's still a lot of truth to that, but I want to walk that back a little. Because as I walk around and observe all these schools, I'm seeing acceptance rates that really make the school look so much more selective than they actually really are. So I'm going to start by sharing a story from my own experience that I think will set the stage for helping to understand the pressure admission officers face. So when I did boarding school admissions from 2002 to 2009, West Down School, 25 miles west of Philadelphia, for 7 of those 8 years, I was responsible for our recruiting strategy. This means I was responsible for determining which markets we would target, how much time we would spend there, what our recruitment approach would be. This involved selecting which fairs we would go to, what schools we'd do visits at, which consultants we'd meet with, which receptions we would do. And one reason I believe I had this role is because I enjoyed recruitment travel more than anyone else on the team. I traveled the most of the 5 admission officers in our office. I had the DMV area, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, every single year. And I was on a trip doing a reception in a home with an alumni and a current parent. And it was an upscale crowd full of highly educated professionals. And D.C.'s a really interesting place to recruit because I would say it doesn't have the level of intensity or aggression that you sometimes see in the parent body in New York and Boston and North Jersey. It's full of highly educated, very successful, ambitious parents, especially that sort of Bethesda to Northern Virginia area. And they just have a little bit of Southern genteelness to them that takes a bit of the edge off them, but they're every bit as committed to their kid getting the absolute best education as any other place in the country. So, I'm doing this reception, in a home, like I said, of a parent and alumni. It's a 90-minute reception. Do the presentation, do the Q&A. Typically, you're doing like 30-minute PowerPoint, 30 minutes of Q&A, refreshments. Then you stay around and people come up to you and ask questions, another 30 minutes. So 3 people come up to me and they ask, what is your acceptance rate? In the after, the part after when you've kind of broken the group up and some people leave and some people are mingling. At the time we had a 50% acceptance rate. And on each occasion when I shared that, I got this facial reaction, and in some cases almost a really low kind of guttural response they probably didn't even realize they were making. But to me, it was very clear, as if they were screaming, I am not sure if you're selective enough for me to be excited about sending our kid to your school. Now, the Westtown school where I worked was a highly respected school, especially for those in the know, especially those who value quicker education. But it wasn't as famous as the most well-known boarding schools: Andover, Exeter, Deerfield, Choate, Hotchkiss, Groton, Lawrenceville, St. Paul's, or Episcopal High School in Alexandria. But what was the effect that those responses had on me? I came back to the office and I recommended we recruit from some places where I was confident that we would get 150 to 200 applications. Partly because I wanted to find great kids there and I knew we would, but also I knew that meant that we would also deny a lot of kids and we would get our acceptance rate down into the 30s. I came back saying, we got to get our acceptance rate down in the 30s to have a higher yield with these families that we're trying to attract. And we eventually did get it down to 39%. But why do we need to do this? Because it mattered to families, if we were going to yield them, that they went to a place that they thought was some kind of attainment that they got into. Now, a lot of colleges function the exact same way. The overwhelming number of somewhat to very selective colleges have the following mindset. How can I bring in the students, the people I answer to expect me to bring in, the stakeholders, while simultaneously making students feel like it's a real honor to get an acceptance from our school? Knowing that if they feel this way, your chances of yielding them are better. I would love a nickel for every student who has said to me over the years, I don't want to go to fill-in-the-blank school. They accept almost everyone who applies. Now, there's certainly some public schools that have a mission that function a little differently, but this has just not been my experience with private schools. So what I want to do today is share some of the most common ways in which colleges make their acceptance rates look lower than they actually are. One common way this is done is by taking a lot of transfer students or spring admits. These numbers are not asked for by all the ranking guides, so they are all but invisible when a college shares their acceptances. I was talking to a VP of enrollment on this trip, and we were talking about some schools that have really gotten hot. And he mentioned to me, you know how many transfer students they take? Do you know how many spring admits they take? Those kids are all but invisible. They can hide them, and they're not counted in their statistical profile. I talked to another VP who said our challenge is to grow our students while protecting our profile, meaning not have our stats make us look like we're getting less selective. Now, we've talked quite a bit about the growing number of schools that admit kids to different campuses but don't count them in their numbers. Northeastern's the poster child for this, but just because they've executed it better than anybody else. Many are looking at Northeastern and trying to be Northeastern and seeing if they can pull off the success Northeastern has been able to have with that approach, with that playbook. We've also talked about how some colleges count only a small portion of the application as completed to drive up their admit numbers. That's got a little bit harder because of how reporting is being asked to be done now, but that still can happen. Remember, some schools still have their own application. Another one we've talked about a lot, but it really impacts admission rates, even more than I believe I've articulated. This involves using sophisticated methods of using demonstrated interest and affinity to figure out which students are likely to come, and then prioritizing them in your admission offers. I visited a few schools on this trip, and when I visited, as soon as I saw their acceptance rate, I knew right away that they were doing this. And they were honest enough to confirm it in their conversations. And I know that might seem slick from the outside, but is in the institution's best interest to do this, because as your selectivity goes down, your yield goes up, and not only does your yield go up, but your yield goes up for the strongest applicants in your applicant pool, and therefore you make your school stronger. And so how can you ignore this when your primary job in admissions is to strengthen the college that you're recruiting for? Now, we all have our trigger words. And one trigger word for me is the term safety school. I don't like that word. You'll never hear me use it unless I'm using it to make fun of it or to criticize it in a pejorative way. I don't like that term even a little bit. And if you use it around me, I'm most likely going to correct you. I don't like it partially because a student might end up at this school, and it's really hard for a student to feel inspired about something that was referred to as a safety school. So now they feel distressed and downcast. But I also don't like it because just because your student's profile is stronger than the average admit, that doesn't mean they're going to get in. Many schools are looking at whether or not they think you're going to come and factoring that into where they make their offers. And other times your profile may look stronger than the average admit, but they may have so many kids that look similar to you that you're just not seen as someone who will add to their student body as much as another kid. So I just hate that term safety school unless the school makes it crystal clear. We admit by the numbers, and if you have the statistical profile, then you're admitted. And even still, I don't like it because it's not inspiring. I still prefer to call that assured admissions or guaranteed admissions. Now, let me share another method that is used. We've touched on here before, but it's been a while since we've discussed it. Sometimes it's called ED3. Not sort of in public, but amongst admission officers. What you do is you waitlist kids you are not sure if they're coming. Then you put out feelers very early, before May 1st. You don't want to wait until May 1st because they might commit somewhere else. It used to be that when this would occur, it would occur in early or mid-April, but now it's happening in mid and late March. Two of the schools in college admission circles who are most known for this are Colby College in Maine and the University of Chicago. The key in this system is that when you put out feelers to see if someone is coming, you don't count them as an accept. If you put out a feeler and the student doesn't express interest, they just don't ever show up in your numbers. They're invisible. That's why it's sometimes called ED3, because there's close to a 1-to-1 ratio between people you admit and enrollees. They only count if you enroll. There are other methods that I've mentioned here, such as trying to flip a student from EA to ED, or another common one is listing the number of applications that you got for the number of students you need to admit, which almost always works. For example, you list in your info session that you've got 10,000 applications for 1,000 spots. And people are like, wow, they only take 1 out of 10. So if I'm one of the ones that gets a lucky ticket, I'm using this pejoratively, then I have to go. How could I turn that down? Well, what if you have to admit 8 kids in order to get 1? What if your acceptance rate is closer to 80%? What sounds better? We admitted 10,000 students for 1,000 spots, or we accept 80% of our applications. Now, we spent most of our time sharing 4 of the most common methods I see colleges using to make themselves look more selective. And they are, in summary, not counting transfers and spring admits, not counting kids who start overseas or at a different campus, using predictive modeling to identify who you think is coming and not coming, and then only admitting those who you think are likely to come over another kid that's equally as desirable, and then waitlisting kids you really want but you're afraid you won't yield, and then proactively working to recruit and reel them in before they commit elsewhere by putting out feelers to see if they'll come, and then only counting them if they enroll. The reason colleges present their data in the most favorable light is important because it can lead a student to not apply. Because based on acceptance rates, they think their odds don't look good, but in reality, their odds are a lot better. Now, I think I know what some of you may be thinking. This doesn't make any sense. You're telling me, Stuck, a college needs students. Why would they risk deterring an applicant from applying? Because when the student sees the low acceptance rate, it psychs them out. And the reason is because the value of being seen as a prized admission offer so helps you attract and yield top kids that trade-off is worth it. You can always use other creative ways to let applicants know that you really want them. Maybe it's through student search and you bombard them with emails or with direct mail. Or maybe it's more personal outreach or attempts to get them on campus or having students reach out or professors reach out. There's a myriad of ways that you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. Not scare off people who you think may be afraid, but still signal that we're a really good get if you're one of the fortunate ones to get an offer from us. So here's the $1 million question. How can I or how can you know if a college is not as selective as their admit rate indicates that it is? Well, to be honest, you can't always know. But here are a few clear clues that a college is not as selective as their admit rate. Number one, do they give a merit scholarship to a very large percentage of students who apply? Now, when colleges give a merit scholarship to almost every student, or in some cases, literally to every student, they present it in the most favorable way. And they should do this. They're recruiters with their jobs to strengthen the school that they work for. So you'll hear things like, we are super generous with our merit money. More than 80% or whatever their stat is get merit money. Now, I can assure you, colleges that give merit money to almost every student don't do this because they want to do it. They do it because they have to recruit with price, which is how most schools feel they need to recruit. So don't look down on this. It's very, very tough for a school to get you to pay $15,000 to $50,000 more than another bunch of other schools that you're admitted at, unless you have a very compelling reason to do this. And normally, this only applies to some of the biggest brands in the nation. Some very, very prestigious schools have found they cannot do that. I had a conversation with a VP of enrollment on the trip about that. We were talking about some really well-known schools that are absolutely getting slammed and not making their number. I'm not going to mention them here because I don't necessarily think he would want me to share it, but because they refuse to go to merit money, and they're getting slammed and they're getting killed, and these are respected schools. The second way is to look at the distribution of the class by GPA. When you see more than a few kids getting in with GPAs below 3.0s or below 3.25s, and I say those numbers because that's how it's tracked, and you see a low admit rate, then you can be assured that they're taking a wide range of kids and using some creative ways to share their admit rate. Not unethical, but creative. Now, I imagine some of you are saying, Stuck, how can I get this information? The common data set has this information. So if you go to section H2, H is everything about money in the common data set, and that's a section on merit money, and you compare line G, which is how many got aid, merit money aid, to line A, total number of students, then you can see who's giving a high percentage of aid, merit money to students. And for GPA, you can just go to section C11, and it's just clearly laid out there. You can see the GPA for the students and how many kids get in different GPA bandwidths. Now, just know some schools do skip these questions. And remember, there are a bunch of aggregators out there. So if you don't feel like going to the common data set, which is going to take a little bit more time, you can go to certain websites like collegedata.com or the College Board's product, Big Future, or another federal government product, College Navigator. And they've just taken all the common data set information and put it to you in a quick, easy form. And the final way is just ask your counselor, whether it's school-based CBO or IEC, when you see some low admit rate schools, and ask if that's been consistent with the admissions decisions that they've seen. Or if your school uses scatter plots and score or Naviance or something, you can also look there as well. Well, friends, this is just one of over a dozen observations I made from these school visits, and you can expect a lot more of these in 2025. They're not all going to be consecutive because sometimes I have other things I need to cover, such as questions for listeners when they start pouring in, but expect a lot more of these rest of 2025, and I'll try to pick ones that I think will be of interest to you. We will now transition to the final part of Lisa's interview with Jenny Winthrop and Rebecca Anderson, the two authors of the best-selling book, The Disengaged Teen.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
And friends, we're at the final part of Lisa's interview with Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop, authors of the hot book, The Disengaged Teen. And in this part, Rebecca gives us 3 different insights when it comes to how to appropriately handle technology in your teen's life. Jenny adds the importance of talking with your teen about technology. Jenny talks about developing agency as a learner with technology. Jenny and Rebecca share the skills students are going to need when it comes to AI in education. Rebecca and Jenny talk about the importance of critical thinking, and they talk about technology as a substitute for intimacy. And Rebecca talks about the role of agency in keeping AI in perspective. Listen and enjoy.
So, technology, tell me about how that has affected the engagement level of teens. Is it all bad? Are there good things
Technology.
about it? I know.
I'll kick off and pass to Jenny because we have an entire chapter in the book called Ending the Tech Wars that parents should check out. So, technology is very complicated in our lives as adults and as kids because there's some things that are really good and there's a lot of things that are really bad. So it's not like cigarettes, it's all categorically bad. It's like food. There's some food that's really good and there's a lot of food that's, gonna give you diabetes. So Jenny and I would say three things. One, absolutely 100%, particularly mobile phones and social media, but any screens, you have to, as parents, limit them for your kid to make sure they do not get in the way of the basics, which are sleep, exercise, in-person socialization and interaction with your family, with your friends, with your neighbors, whoever, and time outdoors. Those are really fundamental to children's well-being and development. And the technology companies have very different incentives than we parents do. Their
Yes, they do.
incentives are to keep all of us, keep your kids on their devices as long as possible. So until that gets regulated, until the never-ending scroll stops, until algorithms change, we have to step in. We are the front lines. So that's one. Number two, we are very supportive of removing phones from school. It's distracting. There's lots of other ways to use technology. There's tons of tech in most schools, iPads, internet, laptops, etc. If you want to look up documentaries on YouTube or watch videos or learn how to search or use generative AI, etc., within a contained learning oriented way, but having cell phones where kids get hundreds of notifications a day while they're trying to absorb learning and interact with peers is deeply damaging to the engagement and learning process at school. We talked to this is just one example, one school principal who said that 80% of the fights and behavioral problems that were happening in her school, this was probably 2 years ago, started on social media. And so, they shut it down and it got a lot better. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is, to really see where kids are exploring online. If your kid is literally creating new mini documentaries, if your daughter started creating her own little mini documentary series on who killed JFK or whatever, like how my sunflower is blooming in my backyard, whatever it is, that's creative, that's exploration and using technology as a tool. If they're just literally scrolling, they don't remember what they did or what they learned, that is not using technology for explore moments. So that's the balance. I don't know, Jenny, what else would you add?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would add is it's just really important to have a lot of conversations about it. I think a lot of people are watching adolescence right now, and I think it's sort of like you don't want porn to be there and you don't want to bring it up because you think you might be the reason they go look for it. Probably not. Chances good they're already there. So better to have the conversation than not. Self-harm, were you seeing self-harm on social media? What have you seen? You can always lead with open-ended questions. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing, and how it makes you feel? And really, we do have to be so careful with judgment because as soon as you judge them, they'll stop telling you anything. So I think this idea of real conversations, both about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, what they love. I have to spend a lot of time talking about skincare products because that is something that really seems to interest my children, which I find baffling because I'm really not that into makeup, but it's interesting to them. And so it's don't judge, be curious. And then I can be a little judgmental because I can be like, hey, do we really want to spend that much time with this? But I have to start with, hey, what are you looking at? What are you watching? Who are you following? That kind of conversation. And then I think this idea of sort of negotiating limits with them. We have I have one kid who really loves social media a lot. And I think she would honestly say that she would spend way more time on it than she does if we didn't set limits together. But I'm not super draconian. Like, I think she should have some time on it, but it's just, to me, an open question to her. How much time do you want to give to these tech companies? How much of your attention are you choosing to give to them every day? Because, if it's 4 hours, that's 4 hours of your day, 16 hours of, whatever, 20 hours of your school week. Like, is that the choice you want to make? And she doesn't actually want to make that choice, but if without the limit, she would. So we talk about them, we change them, they change. They often ask for me to remove their limits at sleepovers because they want to do TikToks, and I usually do. And, anyways, I won't go on, but I do think it's really sort of developing agency. We talk a lot in the book about developing agency as a learner. And I think this is developing agency with technology tools, which will allow you to have agency as a learner, because you will be making choices versus defaulting to being sucked into, kind of being dragged into the vortex of the attention merchants, which is technology today. So
Yeah, my dad would always say, he was in advertising, like if you get something for free, like, you're the product.
yeah,
And so you're the
Exactly.
one that's being sold. And so I always try to tell my kids that, like,
Mhm.
hey, if you're on TikTok and, you're getting sucked into these things, like who's benefiting from that? It's probably not
How
you,
is the money
you
being
know?
made?
Yeah.
You are the
Yeah.
product. Your eyeballs are the product. Yeah.
Yeah, they make this to bring you in to show you something. But then, on the other hand, my son, he would love playing this game on Roblox, and it was like invading all these countries, and he would be working with his friends and planning campaigns, and he learned where everything on this earth is. And he won the
Yeah.
geography bee at his
Yeah.
school. Because, and I don't know where anything is. Not because we were pushing him, because he was curious,
yeah.
like, and he learned that. He was engaged with that game. So I mean, it's a plus minus thing for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says you have. I was just talking to someone who her daughter graduated from a great university in the UK. She thought she was really well prepared for the job market. 2 years into trying to find a job, she's just landed one. She's very excited, and she said that a huge number of the tests that she had to do to get the job were almost video game oriented, and her mom had never let her play video games because she thought it was bad for
Oh,
her learning.
yeah.
And so it's like moderation. We really don't know, what is 10 years out, whatever. So I think this idea of kind of moderation limits and protecting the things that Rebecca was talking about, protecting sleep, in-person connection, time outside, and learning. If we can protect those four things and sort of be building that agency over choices over how to spend it, then I think we're in probably better shape than a sort of blanket discussion of bans and how damaging everything is all the time, which I think both could be quite dangerous messages.
Right, right. Well, and that leads us to the big topic of artificial intelligence. And, you know, that is going to change things so much in ways I'm sure I can't even think of right at this moment. What skills do you feel that today's teens are going to need to thrive in college and beyond in terms of artificial intelligence?
Well, I can start on this one because we are running with my center a large global task force on AI in education. And we are looking at what are the risks. Let's learn from social media. Let's not wait 5, 10 years and be like, oh, shoot, social comparisons were bad. We knew that 10 years ago. We could have solved that.
Hmm.
So what are the risks of things that could be really problematic if AI is not deployed well for children's learning and development? And knowing that, what can we do today to mitigate those and harness the really good stuff that it could present? And so to me, the number one thing that we're seeing at the moment, we're mid task force research and deliberations, is make sure that kids are critical thinkers, because AI can be used to offload that development of critical thinking. And in fact, we know that students are some of the biggest users of
Oh, yes.
ChatGPT. Microsoft Copilot had me come in and speak to their whole global team a little while ago because they found out that students under the age of 18, they recently changed this, but had only said Copilot was above 18, but students were one of the biggest users. In the Philippines, ChatGPT usage goes up 90% when the school year starts. So we need to make sure that kids are developing critical thinking, because if we don't, they're going to, if you don't use it, you lose it. So there's a whole bunch of things that we could talk about, and I don't think we have time about what that means for education, for parenting, for teaching, about making sure you maintain those critical development, those critical thinking skills in an age of AI. But that, to me, is one of the most important.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add to that, like everything we've been talking about technology, like everything with teens in some ways from a parenting standpoint. I think Rebecca's talking a lot about school and parenting, but I think is discussion, right? So having a lot of discussions, doing some experimentation. My daughter just applied for work experience, which is a thing here in the UK. And she was like, I don't know how to do a CV. And I was like, ask ChatGPT. I can't think of a better tool for it, and it spit it out. And then I was like, so what do you think's good about this and what's not? She didn't actually really know. She didn't really know what a CV was. So it was an interesting experience. And like, she was like, I don't know, seems good. And I was like, okay, you don't really have a frame in which to put this, but it was a template. I said, tell it everything you're doing and see what happens. And then we worked on that for a good 2 hours, just the two of us going back and forth. And then afterwards, I was kind of like, so remember back to that first version, like how good was that? And she was like, oh yeah, it wasn't very good. But in the moment, she thought it was great because she didn't really know. And so I think those moments, like, can you find a moment where it could be useful, right? Like, can you find something that's good? And then can you then use that activity or moment to then say, hey, it was really good for this thing, for making a CV, or a first draft of a cover letter that's going to go out to 2,000 different people, right? That was not my daughter. But versus like, hey, what would happen if you just had it do your English essay? Like, what do you think would happen to your writing skills? Like, oh, it would be so much better. Like, no. What would happen to your writing skills if you had the computer do it? And it's like, what do you mean? Like, well, your spelling is sometimes off. Like, if you had the machine, if you had AI do it, is your spelling going to get better? It's like really articulating what might feel more basic to us because we go from that A to Z, those steps. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess I wouldn't see the word being typed wrong, being underlined by the spell check, having to check it, that kind of process. Oh, that's how my brain's learning how to spell, right?
The thing I would leave for your audience and parents and you is that the technology is developing so rapidly. It is almost hard to comprehend. And the thing that is very much on my mind now is actually not the cognitive chatbots with text doing kids' essays. That is on my mind. We have to deal with that. We have to figure out education systems that develop critical thinking and skills in that context, which might be a lot more oral discussion, or figuring out how to help kids learn to, write as a process of critical thinking. But it's actually AI for intimacy. This is very much on my mind. This is kind of the next new wave. AI companions, kids having best friends who are AI, AIs who are unethical, convincing kids to do things they shouldn't. We've already seen some terrible effects, and companies basically saying it's not my responsibility. So, I would actually urge people to check that out. We partner with a group called the Center for Humane Technology. They have a lot of research on that. And because we have to be vigilant as parents because regulation is so far behind.
No, there is none. Yeah, I know even for my profession, being a psychologist, that like there are AI therapists
Yeah,
now, and some of them are not good.
right.
And I joke like that there was somebody made like a llama, like a therapy llama for kids, and I was like, great, now I'm getting, replaced by a llama. But some of these are not a llama. They're, they would seem like me. There are, but they are giving horrible
Yeah,
advice. And, in some cases, even causing people
harm.
to kill themselves.
Yeah,
So it's frightening.
yeah.
On the other hand, I just read an article this morning about that doctors have developed an AI where they can put someone's rare disease into it, and it will like go through all of the medications that were ever invented or that are available, and it will come up with a combination. And many times they're finding cures
Yes.
for these diseases, which I mean, that's a great use of
So
AI right there.
you bring out something that we talk a lot about in our Brookings task force, which is adults who have been through the education system, like the doctor you referenced, or the scientists who are using AI to find new ways to fold protein, which will create drugs that will cure lots of things, or the climate scientists or epidemiologists who are using AI to find viruses in wastewater, to predict outbreaks and prevent lots of diseases. All those adults have agency over the AI.
Mhm.
They went through
Right.
school.
Exactly.
They went through school without it. They have critical thinking. They have content knowledge. They know how to use AI. When we are talking about direct to kids and children developing these skills that they need to manage and be in the driver's seat of AI, it is a totally different story. So there, and the AI companion, some universities tell us, look, we have like an AI companion screener because we do not have enough mental health counselors, and they just do a basic screening and it seems to help a lot. And then there's and it's ethical, they've designed it, and like there's triggers, and then they'll boot you up into a real life person if needed. But some kids just need a little somebody to talk to, and actually kids are preferring to talk to them because they know they won't be judged because it's a robot.
Yeah.
So I mean, there could be new useful ways, but we have to be very, very intentional about it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So where can our listeners find your book, The Disengaged Teen? Where can they purchase this wonderful book?
In an independent bookstore near you, absolutely, I hope. And on Amazon, if you would like to, another option. In any bookstore, you should be able to find the book or order the book. You can find me on Instagram at Jenny Anderson Writes, or on LinkedIn, Jenny Anderson NYT. And I write a Substack, which is called How to Be Brave, which is Adventures in Learning.
And
Fantastic.
I would urge all the listeners also to visit our website. We do have a website, Jenny and I, and you can connect with us there. It's called thedisengagedteen.com. And you can also stay in touch with me on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter called Winthrop's World of Education. We do talk a lot about AI in that. And I'm on Instagram at Dr. Rebecca Winthrop.
Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate all of your knowledge and the research that you've done on this. And I know it's going to help our teens become explorers. So I wait for that day.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
again.
for having
Fun.
us.
On Thursday's episode, Fitz and I have our final segment of looking at admissions decisions this year. For a question from a listener, Susan and I answer a question from an anonymous mom from Northern Virginia, and she wants to know if we have any advice for her laid-back son who is content getting B's in high school. We have a brand new interview, and it is a long one. I'm doing a 5-part interview for the whole month of May with Peg Keogh, the Chief Academic Officer at College Aid Pro, and Peg is letting us know what we need to know about missed opportunities when completing the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And we have a brand new interview, and it's with Nate Haverman, the VP of Enrollment at Hope College in Michigan. And Nate is doing a deep dive for us to help us understand Hope College. You'll hear part 1 of 4. Friends, one of the highlights of these trips that I take is I get to see students I'm working with for the first time. I get to see clients I've worked with in the past who are in college, usually for the first time, like in person. And I was meeting a student and her mom for lunch in College Station, Texas on Wednesday. And this student is a senior, and she's about to leave the state and go about 1,000 miles away from home. So at the end of our meal, her mom says to me, "What advice do you have for my daughter when she goes off to college?" And friends, I'll leave you with the advice that I shared with her. I said, I want to share 2 things with you. The first thing is this: show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Be very, very careful with who you associate with. Friends, I could keep you up to midnight with riveting, alarming, and chilling stories of college students who got in with the wrong crowd and how it sabotaged them for years afterward. The final piece of advice I gave her was this: be proactive, be proactive, be proactive. Don't be reactive. What does this mean? Seek out all the support from the Academic Success Center. Take that speed reading course or that writing course and all the other supports that they have and the tutoring that's available. Schedule meetings with your advisor. Schedule office hours with faculty. Most years, friends, I work with at least 1 or 2 college professors. And I was working with a college professor from CU Boulder. And he said to me, you know, I love meeting students. I love meeting students. And I put my office hours up every single year. And almost nobody comes by to meet me, and I'm just sitting in my office. That's what I don't want you to do. I want you to be proactive, get to know your RA, get to know people in career services, get to know residential life, get to know, disability services, if that applies, or multicultural affairs, whatever's left of it these days, if that applies. Don't wait for the Red Sea to part. Make it happen yourself. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid.website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.